It gives me a starting place with clients because I know they have a resource in their body, and it's just us finding that, us exploring that. And once they find that, and they can find it consistently, that's what we work on first. Then when we do the deeper work, they always have a resource to go to.
Hi there, I'm here with Linda Richards. She's a somatic psychotherapist, and I'll let you take the floor and introduce yourself.
Hi, I've been working as a therapist for the past 30 years and mostly in trauma work doing EMDR. EMDR, it's an acronym for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. What it does is it connects your thought, your negative cognition, something that you believe about yourself in a negative way that's false, the thought, and then it connects the sensation that goes with the thought and pairing that with an image and then moving the eyes or limbs or sound bilaterally. And in doing so, it helps the body to process the trauma. I took EMDR training when I was a graduate student in 1997. I was actually one of the first ones who took EMDR that way. I used EMDR for years and years and kept finessing that practice and learning more about it. And after, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years, people kind of didn't want to do it because it was too intense. It was too much. EMDR brought me to other work too, to study more about dissociation and working with clients who have DID or multiple personality disorder, which then led me into ego state work and internal family systems work because I'm working with so many people who are compartmentalized. So, internal family systems help me to provide a framework with clients to separate out the compartmentalization so that we could bring them back together again. Internal family systems and EMDR really have provided the foundation of my work. However, if you don't have enough resource when you're using EMDR, meaning you don't have enough positive experiences in your life, what happens when you start processing in EMDR is you get overwhelmed and flooded, and many people leave the session without feeling regulated. They feel dysregulated, and that can last for days. And so they come back to the next session and they're very hesitant to jump into that again. So we have to spend that session or even a couple sessions restabilizing after doing one session of EMDR. It was very difficult for trauma clients to find enough resource externally to be able to mitigate the kind of sledgehammer effect that EMDR sometimes has. And so I started to move to more somatic work. I started looking into somatic experiencing, some of Pat Ogden's work, and other clinicians who were doing somatic work. I was in interpersonal neurobiology for quite a while, for 3 or 4 years. I'm still interested in that work, but it's very intellectual. He does go into the body some, and he does go into movement some, but not enough to really capture what this is all about. It's not something that the average person can read the book and go, oh, I understand that. It's not user friendly at all.
Did
Um,
you ever work with anyone outside of the psychotherapy world to learn more body stuff? Because some therapists go into, let's say, yoga or meditation.
I did do a stint of meditation for a couple of years.
Mhm.
It was through the interpersonal neurobiology. They have a specific meditation that covers 4 areas. It was a meditation that we were to do daily. And his theory was that if you did this meditation daily and it covered these 4 areas of the body, that the body would then start to reorganize. And so I did that meditation for 2 years and I really didn't find anything happening. When I came upon Sue's work, it really spoke to me and provided me with more information that I wasn't able to get in other somatic work, but then none of them included the resourcing. None of them really included how the body works as a whole system. It was still piecing it out. In Coherent Body, it captured everything that EMDR has, plus the explanations, along with the natural resource that everyone has in their body. It just seemed to hit home for me. It was like the holy grail that I had been searching for throughout my whole career, really. When I started to practice Coherent Body, I did feel immediate results. And I started bringing it into my practice and teaching it to clients. And clients were experiencing changes quickly, immediately, and then in long term too. Even if they were only able to do Coherent Body a little bit at a time, maybe 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at night, they were able to move from being stuck to going forward. And that was happening consistently with just about all of my clients. The clients that it didn't work so well with had a lot of physical limitations, but even with those clients, I was able to give them a few things from Coherent Body that they use daily. Some of them are not mobile at all, they can only sit in a chair. There are some things in Coherent Body that help them to continue to move forward, even though their bodies aren't necessarily fully cooperating. And so it gives me a starting place with clients because I know they have a resource in their body, and it's just us finding that, us exploring that. And once they find that, and they can find it consistently, that's what we work on first. Then when we do the deeper work, they always have a resource to go to. So the overwhelm never happens. By the end of the session, if we're working on something deeper and they get dysregulated, it's an opportunity to practice their new skill. And that's what the sessions become all about, is practicing the resource in their body. And the more they practice that, the more the trauma just gets discharged because they keep stepping into the body of resource, as you call it, instead of staying in the body of story, right? Most people coming into therapy are coming in their body of story, and that's where they stay. They want to tweak the body of story and make it right under that ceiling. And they don't have the concept that if they step out of that into a body of resource, which they didn't know they had, it transforms them instead of just tweaking what they already have.
That's great. Can you explain more the type of people that you see? Because I think you explained to me like some of them are court ordered. So can you describe them
Mhm.
more?
Yeah, I typically serve people who are underserved, lots of trauma histories. Some of them are court ordered. Some people have their children taken away. Some people are coming in because of criminal activity or drugs and alcohol, things like that. And so, what Coherent Body does takes away all the shame about it because we talk about the physiology of what's happening with them. And then I give them the tools to be able to manage their internal world because they're trying to manage their internal world with drugs, alcohol, or, whatever the court order was, is causing them to harm themselves and others. So, when they have a tool that can alleviate this discomfort in the body almost immediately, then all of a sudden they step into their more rational brain because they have the body along with it, and it helps them to make better choices. And that helps them to get through the whole court process better and to start making better life choices because they're not, scattered or disorganized anymore. They have the tools to come back into the body right away.
So are these are people who don't have experience with somatic practices or going to therapy? Are they,
Right.
and how easily is it for them to get what you're teaching?
For some people, they get it right away. It really depends, it seems, on how physical they seem to be. People that seem to be more physically fit seem to get this quicker. And people with severe trauma it takes a lot more time for them to feel comfortable enough to actually stay in the body. I'll get them to come into the body for seconds, literally, and then they're out again. And we keep repeating that until they can come into the body and go, oh, this is okay.
How do you build the trust for them to do that? What's the process? Is it just in relating to you? They're almost coming against their will if it's court ordered, right?
Right, right. And I think a lot of that it comes from shame because they feel like they're going to be judged right away, and when they come in and feel that there's no judgment, that this isn't really about you being a bad person, that you're not a bad person. You're a human who doesn't know how to connect with yourself. And so I want to teach you how to find yourself so that you can be who you truly are. And that's the whole premise of us meeting. So there's no background story, kind
Mhm.
of. It comes in clean. What I'm finding organically in my practice happening is that I'm starting to attract people who have been through lots of therapy
Mhm.
and have realized that it hasn't really done a whole lot. And so they're coming in and finding results. And then all of a sudden, they're starting to talk about their relationships. And so now, in the past 2 months, I've attracted 20 new clients who have the same issue.
Mm.
And that is lack of capacity in themselves or their partners, that they're understanding that they live under their ceiling or their partner's ceiling instead of their resource ceiling.
What do you mean by ceiling?
I suppose it's another way of saying body of story and body of resource. I just worked with somebody, another court order, where she was blowing up at work on the factory line. So she was court ordered for 6 sessions, and I'm teaching her how to stand in her three keys because she stands on the factory line all day. Now she stands in her three keys, and I taught her some things to bring her back to center, and she was just amazed. I mean, she couldn't believe it. She goes, I could stand all day. That means I could go home and not be tired. That means maybe I'm not going to snap at my coworkers. It was just the transformation after the first session was just incredible. And I see that over and over again. I had a person come in the first session. First, he was like, I'm not going to change my ways. He was more guarded and defended. But by the third session and just doing coherent body, his whole demeanor changed. And
When you talk about guarding and protection, a lot of that is feeling fragmented and not having that center.
yeah,
I mean, that center is really something that's palpable and real, and it's at the center of your body and self, and you can feel it and you can go there and you have the stability from which you can be
mhm,
open and available. But if you don't have that, you're still in the midst of trying to bring yourself together, so you can't be open and available. The house isn't ready, you know?
right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, and that's such a beautiful way to put it because there's no conversation if the house isn't ready. And
Yeah.
so many couples, try to have that conversation and it just never works.
Yeah, yeah. And if your house is always in disarray and you're ashamed to have people over, then to further that analogy, like if you keep your house ready for guests, then you're living in a place that is available. Otherwise, you're always playing catch up or you're trying to rush to get it ready,
Mhm.
but it's available. People can drop in,
Yeah,
you can enjoy it yourself.
yeah,
And mostly, I think about organizing a space as like it has open space.
yeah.
Not every space is taken, like it has open space. So that just like having a blank page, there is possibility there
Mhm.
and readiness for the unexpected.
Yes, and people report that too in tangible ways. I get reports from almost all of my clients over time. is I'm noticing that I'm not blowing up at my kids anymore. I'm
Oh,
not
that's
getting
great.
irritated with my wife anymore. I have a lot more patience on my job.
That's great. Can you speak to why you think that this works when some of the other things that you've been working with haven't?
I think it's the bridge of coherence because too many other things get compartmentalized in therapy session. And because I really encourage people to try to find coherence throughout the week, even the people who don't do it perfectly, because they have the intention to try and find coherence, it keeps them moving forward. Like when I was getting into Pat Ogden's work and even some SE work, things went very slow. So people were still leaving the session feeling like maybe something happened, maybe that felt a little better, but I don't know how to recreate that. I don't know how to go back there again. And so it became dependent on the session and what they could, it became more dependent on me then. And they didn't really carry the tools from week to week so much. They thought they had to come in and then we had to go through the somatic experiencing. And, even though I would encourage them, you can do this on your own, you can do this at home, they just never seemed to carry that over. I never provided the information about coherence and what's happening in the body when they're actually doing these things. So I think the ability to access something so simple on a daily basis is a lot of people will just say, I'm going to try this. The more traumatized clients have a harder time with that because I think they need somebody side by side with them more until they can go off on their own and do it. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
So are you saying that because there was not enough explanation that they didn't feel like they could do it on their own? Because you said before you would still encourage them to do it on their own.
Mhm, mhm.
So I'm just trying to figure out the difference.
Well, I think part of it is the standing and the walking,
Mhm.
because in somatic experiencing, you're tracking sensations, but you're not pairing that with anything that you do in your daily life, really.
Mm,
You'd get into the story. And with all of these things, you're getting into the story
mm.
and then using the story to try to metabolize the sensations. And
Right.
so we're not really getting into much of resource at all.
I see. I see. Because it's still attached to story. And so by creating that framework where story and resource are actually separate,
Mhm.
then that seems to work very well.
Yes, yes. And I think that's why it kind of meshes too with internal family systems because you're trying to separate past story from current story. And coherent body takes it a step further, current story to resource story.
Just on a personal note, what we discovered with you that's been very powerful is that your early birth made midline access more difficult. That kept being a challenge all your life. The whole idea of crossing the midline in EMDR versus creating the midline, I think was a really key distinction that you named. Can you talk
Mhm.
more about that?
Yeah, I have to say that since I've been doing coherent body work, I feel like more of myself. I'm tempted to say it's a whole new me, but it's not. I've always been here, but I never had access to myself. And I know that sounds strange, but I've always felt like very diffuse in this world. Spent my whole life trying to center myself and not knowing what the problem was. And so I worked very hard at creating my center through intellect and knowledge and external factors. And when I realized what midline work was, all this heavy work that I was doing started to dissipate, and I started to realize that's what the problem was. And so my life has just become immensely simpler. And so I don't have to work so hard anymore in my thinking. Just everything comes much more naturally. And the nice thing is, I don't feel like all that work that I did in trying to create that midline for myself, it wasn't wasted because what happened was when my midline became more present and stronger, all the things that I learned with my knowledge started to click together. And I'm like, wow, where did all that come from? Well, I've been studying all this stuff out here forever. It just never clicked before
Neverland.
in a way that I could really know it deeply.
Yeah. So can you talk more about what that midline feels like?
I could feel a physical sensation in my midline. The feeling of being centered and grounded and present is always there now. I've never had that, which is strange for me to say because as a therapist, I tried to teach that all these years and struggling with it myself in, creating this external midline to stay present. And then the interesting thing is, in my professional life, I worked so hard to be good at what I'm doing that when I stepped out of work, I would just wonder, who am I? And I don't have that anymore. I know exactly who I am in work, outside of work. Now I just feel so steady.
Steady, stable, those are words I hear a lot. Yeah. Because it's actually a place. Your center, being centered is not metaphoric, it's actually there. Your
Yeah.
spine, your central column of hydraulic support.
And and I don't have the greatest physical body, right? I have spinal fusion. I had my face reconstructed because of a poor underdevelopment of this part of my face. And then the other thing is, at the time that I was born at 7 months. And I believe at 7 months, when you're in utero, is when you start to feel sensations.
Mm,
And so I was already out of the womb at 7 months. So I'm feeling sensations that are coming from external sources instead of the womb. And I know that affected me because as I was doing some of the infinity resolution work and working through some of that, I would get images of hard things around me.
mm.
I couldn't really identify, but I'm assuming that must have been an incubator.